Welcome to Silicon Valley Buzz, the show where we discuss happenings in this, perhaps the most fertile spot in the world for innovation. The South Bay probably hasn't seen this much buzz since the Swarm played in the local multiplexes. I'm your host, Seth Shostak. The producer is Janet Wu. And tonight, everyone's favorite hobby horse, our education system. What's right? What's wrong? And are the schools really worse today than when you were in high school? My guests are both local high school principals, and let me introduce them to you right away. To begin with, we have Anna Lomas, who is a principal at Evergreen High School, the East Side Union High School District in San Jose. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And next to Anna, we have Phil Winston. Phil is the principal at Palo Alto High School in the city of the same name. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, let's get it right out on the table. Anybody who looks at the rankings of America's high school students always finds that they're more than halfway down compared to other first world, even second world countries. Now, is this really true? Is there really a problem here, or is there something wrong with the rankings? Phil?
Well, I think it depends on how you look at the system. And in education, we use multiple measures to assess student progress and to assess the success of a school or a school district. And when you talk about national rankings, you talk about national standards that haven't quite made it all the way down to the classrooms. So the evaluation of the United States, when you compare us to other countries, is different. And I think there's some work to be done in that area.
So you're saying that the rankings themselves might be biased against us?
I think they're a little skewed if you look at it as a whole. And if you use any single measure, then I would question the validity of that. And I would encourage us to use multiple measures to assess our success.
Anna, do you agree with that? I mean, is this just a phony indicator? Is that the problem, or we're actually doing great?
I don't think it's phony, and I do think that, just as Phil was saying, that we do need to look at different measures. You know, here in the United States, in California especially, we have second language learners, we have a huge diverse group of students that we're educating, and we educate them all. So when we look at just one standard of assessment or one tool that we use, we really do need to use multiple tools.
Let me follow up on that just a little bit. You say we educate them all. And the implication is, and I think the facts are, that not all countries do educate everyone through, 18 years of age, or at least 16, whatever it is, right? I mean, is that the case? Perhaps that's what's causing this bad showing.
Correct. It could be, is that, like I said, we are educating all. You know, in other countries, not states necessarily, but other countries do assessments for students to go on to a high school level. We do educate all high schoolers that come to us.
I'm sorry, Phil.
Yeah, I think Anna's exactly right, and I would agree with her. And what the United States does not do that other countries do is filter students as they progress through the education system. So we have a responsibility and an obligation to educate all of our students. And we do that all the way through senior year of high school and post high school for some students with special needs.
Well, let me at least get to this bottom line, though. I think that people who read these scores are, routinely disappointed by the performance of America's schools. Are they wrong to be disappointed? I mean, just yes or no? Is there a need for big improvement here or not?
I think there's a need for improvement. There's always a need for improvement in anything we do. That's the whole basis and foundation, I would think, of learning and teaching and assessment. So there is improvement that needs to happen. And it starts with looking at the common curriculum, looking at instructional strategies that we use. But of course, it's also starting with a base foundation of funding.
Well, let's talk a little bit about funding. Do you have any idea of what we spend on K through 12 education here in the Silicon Valley? I mean, per pupil, how much do we spend relative to, say, the rest of the state, or for that matter, the rest of the country?
I can't speak specifically to Santa Clara County. I can tell you what we spend or what we receive in Palo Alto. And we are a unique district in that we're a basic aid district. So we get revenue, we get a certain amount of money per student from the state, and then we get, in addition to that, property tax money from the city. And so our per pupil funding is about $9,000.
And how does that compare with the state of California as a whole?
It's on the higher end of that. It's on the higher end.
$9,000.
Eastside Union High School District is not a basic aid district, so we do get like $206 per attendance for every student. We get some extra money from the federal government for second language learners, for special needs students, but we don't have what's called a basic aid. It doesn't come from the property taxes. We really look at the funding that the state and the federal government gives to us to do that. So it is lower than the 9,000 that would be at Palo Alto Unified.
Okay, you get some federal funds, but you do not.
We
okay?
do. Both school
you do get
districts
some
get
federal
federal
funds.
funds.
Okay,
Correct.
well, let's just take that $9,000, and yours is somewhat lower. I think that the city of New York spends on the order of $15,000 per student per year, right? And I think that's the highest in the nation, which means that it's almost the highest in the world. I think only Switzerland spends more per pupil than the United States does. So New York is spending more to educate its students than any other place in the world, with the exception of maybe Basel or Geneva. I mean, right? And yet we don't seem to do so well. So, I mean, does it require more money, or is money not the solution here? Anna?
It not necessarily requiring more money, but again, we educate a diverse group of students. And in our district, for example, when we talk about class size, we've gone up from the 24, 26 students in a classroom to 33 to 35 in a classroom. And if you start to calculate that mathematically in a 50-minute period where a teacher is teaching perhaps for 20 minutes of that 50-minute period, that means they don't even have 1 minute per student on a daily basis to have some kind of an interaction with that student.
So how large are the classes at Evergreen High School typically?
They're 30 to 30, well, 30, 33, 35, based on the content. For example, science classes, they're large now at 30, but if we have an English class, large at 33 to 35.
30, 35, and at Palo Alto?
It's a little lower than that. Yeah.
Little lower.
Well, we have continued to creep up over the last couple of years.
Okay, now, but these numbers are larger than the nationwide average. I mean, the nationwide average is quite a bit lower than that, I believe. So why is it that here, in a relatively wealthy part of the state, our teacher-to-student ratio is so unfortunate? What's the problem? Is that money again, or is there policy? What's the problem? Too many students? What?
Well, students continue to come, and like I said earlier, like we both said, we have an obligation to serve them and educate them as best we can. And I think the second part to your question, is definitely money. You can only have so many teachers that you have money for, and the district gives you a certain allotment, and your job is to fill those positions with the most highly qualified people you can find. And that's what it comes down to.
There are advocacy groups for changes in education. I'm sure you're very much aware of these groups. And they have their own agendas. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But they will show you plots of how the cost, or rather the expenditure, I should say, per pupil in this country keeps going up, whereas on that same plot they'll show achievement, standardized tests, and that doesn't change much and hasn't changed for 20 years or something like that. And they say, throwing money at this problem has not solved this problem. What do you say to that, Phil?
I say we need to look at our students in a different light, and students are learning differently today than they were 20 years ago. They're learning differently than they were 5 years ago, right? When you walk on a high school campus nowadays, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a student without a cell phone. And I think we need to try to do our best to stay just slightly ahead of them in terms of how we educate our students. And if we do that and align that with the Common Core standards, which are now what are going to be coming down from the national level and then the state level, we continue to improve. It's not at a rate that makes those groups happy. I think that's what they keep coming back to.
Do you see improvement? Is there improvement?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
There's good news here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Anna, would you?
I'd agree. Yes, there is.
Okay, and you mentioned technology. Not a whole lot of money is spent on technology. I noticed that some of the federal funding for education, 5% of it or some number like that, is intended to bring technology into the classrooms. What's your impression of the effect of technology? If you put computers in the classroom, that was being advocated 20 years ago, put computers in the classroom and these kids will all become geniuses, or at least they'll perform better. True?
I think what you need to do is also remember that the teacher is also the gate, not only the gatekeeper, but the instructor that needs to do that. And we do a lot of professional development to assist teachers in bringing, because technology, just like you said, if you open up a computer and you let a student just do whatever they want with it, well, yes, they may become genius in, you know, a certain software or certain games or things.
Facebook.
Exactly, in Facebook. But you need to make sure you have quality instruction that goes with that, so that it's coupled with the skills that they need to really use technology within learning.
It sounds like you require different teachers, not just different technology.
Well, what we do with the teachers that we have are we assist them in, you know, embracing technology as well. Although that we do have teachers that at different ranges that really do embrace technology.
Do you have a lot of technology at your school, at Evergreen High?
Yes, every teacher has, you know, a laptop. They have an LCD projector, and then we have some teachers that are phenomenal at creating lessons and pulling from a lot of different resources to bring, you know, to bring that reality to the students and the content that they teach.
I think it's almost
Yeah.
self-explanatory that Palo Alto High School would also have a lot of technology. When I was there, it seemed to. But.
Yeah, we do. We're very fortunate. Our city and our district passed Measure A, which was a technology bond. So there's been a huge insurgence of money, which has allowed us to, and again, I say try to keep up with our students. You know, that's the constant struggle, because something that was cool 2 weeks ago isn't cool any longer. But I'd like to touch on one other point before if we're going to move forward, and that is that you know, I'm relatively young in the field, and Anna, you certainly have more experience, but what I've noticed is that it always comes down to the person. You can have the most innovative technology in front of you, you could have the coolest gadget, and if that student doesn't feel a connection to the adult in the room, they're not going to learn as well as they do if they have a connection with that person. And the research is consistently firm on that.
Well, that brings up the whole question of getting good teachers and keeping good teachers. And that, too, is a highly emotional subject, of course. Is there a lack or a surfeit of people wanting to teach at the high school level? Phil?
I think it depends on the subject. There are a lot of math and science people out there right now, and Palo Alto's been very fortunate. We have a very rigorous hiring process. It's different than what most districts do. We actually go and observe that teacher teaching, so we get a chance to see what people are really about. And then at my high school, I've added an additional element where they have a principal's interview at the end. And I make the final call, and we do that as a team with some other folks on that team, and other people have input. But really, the principal has the ultimate responsibility to bring in, and I say this over and over again, only the best people. And in education, because it's a people business, the idea of letting somebody go isn't seen by some folks as being popular. I think it's to the contrary. I think we have an obligation to do that. If somebody says to me, Phil, this just isn't working out, then I need to be professional enough to figure out how to move on in my life. And we, I think, can do a better job of that in education.
Now, you say that the principal, in the end, is the final arbiter of who's going to get to teach. Do you think that the regulations on teachers, because they have to have, you know, pieces of paper, right? They have to, that those are maybe a little bit too stringent? Are they leaving people out? People, for example, practicing scientists, I'll just say that might be very good teachers, but have no certificate. Is that something that needs to be fixed?
My assumption, well, I guess my background would say no, because I do think that some of the rigor that's needed in education is really needed, because a wonderful, intelligent scientist who has a lot may not be able to teach what they know appropriately to a student. Just as Phil said, there has to be a connection, and you can have a lot of information that an outstanding teacher, when you go to see an outstanding teacher as someone just looking from the outside in, makes it look so easy that once you go in front of those 30 pairs of eyes or 33 pairs of eyes, you're wondering, how in the world did this happen? And that's part of why I believe that the rigor still needs to stay there.
All right, well, we're going to get back to this and some of the other aspects of education, what it takes to make it better, right after these announcements.
Unlike commercial or public TV stations, we at KMVT Community Television focus on Silicon Valley residents, organizations, and businesses. We televise to over 100,000 viewers in Santa Clara County, with syndication potential to more than 1 million in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. We at KMVT connect Silicon Valley communities, empower people, and affect change. Do you?
Welcome back to Silicon Valley Buzz. I'm Seth Shostak, and we're talking about education, in particular high school education here in the South Bay. Does it meet the necessary standards? Can it be better? How can we make it better? Is the answer money? Is it smaller class size? What is the answer? In fact, in one word, what would be the answer? If you could only change one thing, what is it that you would change first, Donna?
Instructional strategies.
Instruction strategy. So just the technique of teaching.
Yes.
Bill?
People.
People. People. There is this question of funding for schools. In this country, it is local. We've heard that from both of you, that where you go to school, the kind of school you go to is dependent very much on what the local situation is. And I think the founding fathers thought that that was a good idea. I've lived in Europe where funding came from the federal government, and so every school district got the same amount of funding per pupil, and it didn't matter whether it was a wealthy district or a poor district, they all got the same amount of money. Is this a problem? Because it sounds like it might lead to this sort of positive feedback, where if you're in a poor neighborhood, you have poor schools that continue to produce poorly educated kids that mean that neighborhood will remain poor. I mean, is there a fix to this? Has it been fixed at all?
There's lots of studies done that it can be fixed. And again, I think I'll go back to what Phil is saying. It takes a good group of people working together, community, students, parents, and the staff to really do things in very poor environments, poor communities. That does make a difference.
To make up for the lack of money with better people. But how do you get the better people if you don't have money?
Well, you're talking about two different things. If you're talking about recruiting, hiring, and keeping and maintaining those good people, then I would agree with you that higher salaries, continued support for healthcare benefits because they're continuing to rise, is definitely a way to work at that. But if you don't get the right people in the beginning, it's unlikely you'll see success anyways.
Allow me to ask you this question on the basis of the fact that I did live in Europe, where if you were a high school teacher, for that matter, if you were a kindergarten teacher, it really didn't matter, but your junk mail would arrive with 5 words of titularization before your name, all sorts of honorifics, because you were in the top 5% of what was considered, an esteemed job if you were a teacher at any level. And not only that, you were paid in the top 5% of the wage earners in that country. And consequently, becoming a teacher was a very desirable goal for people. Now, I haven't seen that in this country, and I sort of wonder whether that's what it might take to get those people you say we need in the classroom. I mean, how do we fix that, or is that also not broken?
I believe that that's a wonderful way of fixing what we have. Because if you think about it, what I believe we did was, when we needed teachers, rather than doing like what you say the Europeans did of going to find the top 5% at the university level, we basically put out the word that said, well, we need teachers. We need math and science teachers especially. And it made people feel that, again, because they had a knowledge base in math and science, that they could just automatically come and connect with high school students specifically, or at whatever level, connect and teach them something. And that didn't necessarily happen. And so if we had perhaps gone and looked at the top 5% in whatever content area we needed and given them the opportunity, the respect, the salaries, all of those items, then it might be different.
I support everything you said, and I think the other The other challenge that we have, at least in the Valley, is that you have brilliant 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds coming right out of college, going into high tech, making $90,000 a year. You know, as a teacher, you can't touch that. And who wouldn't want to make money to repay your debt? And also, it definitely hasn't been an attractive or a sexy career for folks. Education is always on the chopping block. It's always getting beat up by politicians, and it's used as a ping pong ball to hit back and forth when people need to get some good press. And if we really went after, if we designed our system like businesses design their R&D departments, we would be getting the cream of the crop. Because there are people out there that will tell you, I would much rather be a teacher than an engineer.
Makes me think of Steve Wozniak.
Yeah,
exactly.
You talk to some of these folks, particularly in Palo Alto, there's a lot of venture capitalists, some very, very successful people, and they want to teach. That's really what they're good at. But nobody went into that profession.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're onto something, absolutely.
Well, it sounds like this is not a problem that we can solve locally very easily. I mean, this is a cultural thing. America regards teaching as, well, if you can't do anything else, then you can teach, right? Better, you should become a stockbroker, become a Wall Street maven, whatever. You'll earn a lot more money, you'll be in the papers and so forth, whereas you'll be a teacher. And that is different, and that's hard to change. I can see that that's different. Let's talk a little bit about demographics. There are two schools near where you are. One is yours, Evergreen, and nearby there's another school, Andrew Hill High School, in San Jose. That's about 70% Hispanic, I think, 30% Asian. It's a low-performing school. Your school has more or less the same demographics, correct me if I'm wrong, and yet, you know, the worst students at your school are doing better than the best students at their school. So the answer is obviously not in the demographics. You can't say it's, English is second language or anything like that. What's the difference? Why is your school great and 2 miles down the road, it's not so great?
Part of it, I think it is socioeconomic status. You know, that area, Andrew Hill, is more of an urban area with a lot of apartments, a lot of transient type of homes when people come in and out, whereas mine is more suburban. You know, they're homes, they're, you know, families that stay there generationally, and there is some of that. I believe that the socioeconomic status is an issue. Demographically, it may not look that way, but when you look at, you take into account the parents' education, you know, some of those other items and how, you know, what they're making, how they're making it, the professions or the jobs that they have, that's one of the big differences.
So the ethnic makeup is not nearly as important as the socioeconomic makeup.
Exactly.
All right, so what do you do about it?
I think that one of the wonderful things is that a school like Andrew Hill has international baccalaureate. It has some specialized programs. They have a medical magnet. They have the opportunity. They've been given some grants, 21st century type of grants that under, you know, they call it Aspire and Inspire, and they bring more time to students and give them an opportunity to stay longer. That's kind of the basis of some of our charter schools, that the things that they do that allows students to have perhaps a longer day and have some experiences that they don't have at some of the other schools.
There have been some op-ed pieces in the papers recently about the fact that we should get rid of summer vacation. That this is a tremendous loss. I have to say, as a student, I would have voted against that. But indeed, there was something in the New York Times recently in which they said, look, you spend 9 months educating these kids, and then 3 months, while their brains fade, and this is a terrific loss. Do you agree with that? Should we get rid of summer vacation?
I have young kids of my own, and I think there's something to be said about that. But in education, and you can please speak in and chime in if you'd like to, but teachers are on the spot from the time they get to work until the time they stop checking email at night. It's an incredibly rigorous job. And from the outside, it might not seem that way. So I would make a pretty firm argument that the summer break is equally needed by our adults so that we can get rejuvenated and be the best educators we can.
Maybe the parents and the teachers need the summer vacation.
Yeah, and, you talk to some high school students and they'll tell you after a couple of weeks they're refreshed, they're ready to come back. And
exactly.
I mean that might speak a little bit to the demographics and the socioeconomic piece, because there is a difference between students in terms of what they do in the summer, and you can see that when they come back. If you have to spend a month or a month and a half reteaching a lot of the material, you're a month and a half behind the standards-based curriculum, and that's not an easy thing to catch up to or with.
What about the position that your schools have here in the Silicon Valley? The Silicon Valley is renowned for its high-tech industry, and of course high-tech requires skilled people. You need people who can program, who can design circuitry, whatever. You don't need to elaborate on that. So education is extremely important here. Are you getting any pushback from the industry here that, doggone it, we can't even hire our own high school graduates? Or is that not true?
We're not getting pushback, we're getting push in. You know, the Silicon Valley companies and tech companies are coming to say, let's have a conversation about what we're expecting from our workers and what perhaps we can do to work together to make that happen. So I don't feel that it's a pushback in my district.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, Google recently conducted its own internal survey, and I believe the #1 trait was being able to collaborate with somebody. So we speak of that all the time at Palo, and most schools do anyways, because that's the key to success in the future. You can know everything there is to know about a subject, but if you can't communicate that to somebody, it's only as good as you're able to communicate.
Reading and writing. Sounds to me like those are the subjects that I think play in any industry, but that's just me. Well,
You have to be able to text now too, though. Right? You have to be able to
add
thumber.
your thumbs.
That's
Yeah,
right.
That's right. Well, listen, we're getting close to the end of the show, but I did want to ask you, you know, if you had omnipotent power, if you could do anything, push any button, achieve any action that you wanted to fix the schools or to improve the schools, what is it that you would do? In one sentence, what would you do? Phil, what would you do?
Sure. I would look at the evaluation system of our teachers and our administrators, and I would look at the funding sources and equalize funding.
Equalize funding. Anna?
Exactly the same, because it's about, like, I keep going back to, you know, what a teacher connects with students and what they're teaching them, and the evaluation system and the funding would be exactly what I would want to
Well, the fact
put
that
on the
it's
table.
2 for 2 suggests that there may be a lot of truth in what you said. Well, alas, the school bell is rung for us. That's all the time we have for now. Thanks to my guests, Anna Lomas and Phil Winston. Also thanks to our always hardworking KMVT staff, always competent as well, and our producer, Janet Wu. I'm Seth Shostak. Thank you for being with us and asking you to join us next month for another episode of Silicon Valley Buzz. Good night.